the inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Back in 2003, when I first deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom, it was my hope that I could tell a mother or father that if their son or daughter was wounded in Iraq, that the care they were going to get is as good as we could get at a civilian one trauma center back home in Cincinnati. Now, 5 tours later, it's really kind of amazing to me because what I do now home in Cincinnati is tell mothers and fathers in Cincinnati that their kids are alive because of what we've learned and have brought back from this theater and other theaters and other lessons learned back home to our civilian trauma centers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. This is Memorial Day weekend, a time that America stops each year to remember the men and women who have served the nation in war. At a moment when the United States troops are engaged in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya, it seems particularly appropriate to focus on efforts of several local service members. As a member of the board of the Henry Winkler Center on the History of the Health Professions at the University of Cincinnati, I had the opportunity. No, cut that. That's not the right. That's the full screen at the end. There should be a photo.
The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Back in 2003, when I first deployed to Operation Iraqi Freedom, it was my hope that I could tell a mother or father that if their son or daughter was wounded in Iraq, that the care they were going to get is as good as we could get at a civilian one trauma center back home in Cincinnati. Now, 5 tours later, it's really kind of amazing to me because what I do now home in Cincinnati is tell mothers and fathers in Cincinnati that their kids are alive because of what we've learned and have brought back from this theater and other theaters and other lessons learned back home to our civilian trauma centers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. This is Memorial Day weekend, a time that America stops each year to remember the men and women who have served the nation in war. At a moment when the United States troops are engaged in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya, it seems particularly appropriate to focus on efforts of several local service members. As a member of the board of the Henry Winkler Center for the History of Health Professions at the University of Cincinnati, I had the opportunity to help create their current exhibit on the 25th General Hospital entitled Courage and Skill in World War II. Through that process, I got to know better 2 surgeons who have served multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. I have invited them to join me for the entire program this morning. Johannigman is the director of the Division of Trauma and Surgical Critical Care at the University Hospital here in Cincinnati. He is a colonel in the United States Air Force Reserves, and has served 5 tours of duty, is that right?
That's correct.
In Iraq and Afghanistan. He is also the Assistant Medical Director for the Cincinnati Fire Department, and that's going to come up later. Dr. Johannigman heads the University of Cincinnati Institute for Military Medicine, which is one of 3 state-of-the-art U.S. Air Force centers for the sustainment of trauma and readiness skills, CSTARS. And Dr. Brad Wenstrup, a surgeon with the Wellington Orthopedics group. Dr. Wenstrup also serves as a physician in the United States Army Reserve and has served on active duty in Iraq as head of surgery at Abu Ghraib. Dr. Wenstrup is active in the community in many ways, including 2 years ago, he ran as a candidate for the mayor of the city of Cincinnati. Brad, welcome back. Jay, welcome to Newsmakers.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
Jay, you were deployed not too long ago, right? How long ago did you come back from your last deployment?
That's correct. So I left last year at the end of July and came home about the middle of December in time for Christmas. So about a 6-month tour over at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. It's a little bit north of Kabul.
And, okay, you've done this 5 times?
That's correct.
Each time you get the call, what's it feel like? What goes through your mind, goes through your nervous system at that point?
It's you know, it's a privilege, and for a surgeon to be able to use their skill set such as it is to take care of America's finest is really a true privilege. And Without a doubt, it's, as I tell other people when they deploy, it's the best of times. It can be the hardest of times. But I will always remember each deployment, and I would never regret a single moment of them. It's obviously hard to be away from the family and my 2 young children, but it is truly a privilege, and I learned so much every time, both about the human being and the skill and the art of surgery.
Brad, you and I have talked a little bit about your experience in Iraq, and you cared, and I think you do too, you care not only for America's soldiers, but there's occasions when you're also caring for Iraqis or Afghanis or whatever,
Correct.
right? Whoever gets hurt
Correct.
comes into that operating room.
Al-Qaeda, especially at Abu Ghraib prison, because our main mission was detainee health care, taking care of the enemy. We took care of our troops, but as soon as we could, if they were stable, we'd get them off to the air base and then to Germany. So our main mission was taking care of the enemy, which is an interesting point about what we do as Americans, because our enemy today has no medical care. There is no medical team. They leave them there to die. And our soldiers go from being a hawk to a dove in seconds and taking care of the enemy. And that's our way of winning over the hearts and minds of people that didn't know us before.
And when somebody comes into that operating room, does it make any difference to the people who are in the, we're going to hear more, we're going to see more clips from this,
Sure.
this video, but any difference at all?
Well, we put our blinders on and just take care of people the way that we know that we're supposed to. But I won't lie, it's definitely much more emotional when it's an American soldier on that table as opposed to someone else.
Now, Brad, you're a specialist. You're orthopedics, and Jay, I know you're
Trauma surgery.
a trauma surgeon, but that can, you can end up in trauma. You could end up operating on any part of the body.
Well,
right?
we often say that we're just general surgeons but don't know what the next case is going to be. But yes, a trauma surgeon is nothing but a general surgeon who's available.
So Brad, you're a specialist who, in stateside, you kind of focus on certain
Correct.
types of operations. What's it like to go and all of a sudden be in a very different kind of situation
Well,
from a doctor's point of view?
Well, from some standpoints, it's similar to being a resident where you're involved with all types of surgery besides what you end up specializing in. So in our case, we had a general surgeon there, and I would assist the general surgeon would assist me. The more hands you had, the better. And when you've got multiple people waiting, even though maybe it's a belly case, he may finish what he really needs to do in his expertise, and where I've been assisting, and I'll say, I'll close up, and you go on to the next one to keep the process going. Surgery, I think Jay would agree that the principles of surgery are the same, but you have your specialties and you just work together.
And in those operating rooms, especially the one that's in this video that you're featured in, it seems there's a lot of doctors around. There's a lot of personnel. It looks like we're well staffed on the medical side in our war zones. Is that correct?
Well, I think it is, but it also reflects the intensity and the purpose. You know, one of the other privileges is that everyone's there with a single purpose in mind, which is to get the soldier well and to get our civilians and all those we care for well as quickly as we can. It's really a different whole environment. You know, up on the wall it says one mission, one team, and nowhere is that ever more true than when you deploy. And besides, there's not much of social life outside the hospital.
Exactly.
So, you know, a matter of you know, getting all your consultants in. They're all living 50 feet off the back of the hospital. So we are blessed. It is a challenge now for the medical corps of the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, because after 10 long years of war, there have been a lot of rotations and a lot of deployments away from home. But again, you never want for hands when you need them. You never hear somebody gripe. Nobody's exactly wishing to come back to the places that we've deployed, but no one ever wonders why we're there.
You know, I want to play a little clip that I found very interesting, and maybe it caught my ear as a historian because of something that you say in this clip, Jay, as you're reflecting on what you've learned and how you've learned it. So let's take a look at this.
Yeah, you know, the things that I've learned are really nothing new. What we are discovering is what military surgeons have known since the First World War. They rediscovered in the Second World War, Korea, and Vietnam. It's that we're taking care of young, healthy soldiers, and if we just give them a chance and sometimes just stay out of their way, we can get them better and send them home. So the advances include things like we're giving whole blood, the same kind of whole blood that we used in the Second World War. It's life-saving, but we don't give it back home in the States. We have combat gauze, we have things to stop our soldiers from bleeding. We've gone back to the Civil War and remembered that tourniquets save lives. Again, that's one of the things I'm trying to get back home to Cincinnati. We're trying to put tourniquets back on the fire departments and the rigs in the city of Cincinnati, because I've been witness over and over and over again that tourniquets save lives in this theater. I see it on a daily basis. So I'd like to tell you that we're smarter than medics ever been in the past, but we're really not. We're just learning all over again. But hopefully this time we're going to keep those lessons learned and we'll pass them forward.
I really found that interesting, the sort of interplay between the past and the present, because I think there's a tendency for those of us outside of medicine especially to assume that the path of medicine is always more and more technical, improved, and whatever was, 100 years ago, you talk about the Civil War, 150 years ago,
Exactly.
certainly can't have anything to do with what we're doing today. So I found that whole interplay that you set up there very interesting.
Well, it's still true that for us, when we are serving as military medics, our enemy is the soldier bleeding to death. And that was very much true in the Civil War, in Korea and Vietnam, and in Iraq and Afghanistan. So a lot of our focus is still remembering the basics. And what's been really interesting is that in between Vietnam and up until the first Gulf War, in my opinion, we had lost our focus a bit in creating huge hospitals that were very, very sophisticated, had all the high technology, but were in fact not able to move anywhere at all. Now, all that wonderful technology is life-saving, but it's not life-saving if you're so far away from the soldier that you can't be near them when they're wounded. So what's been dramatic to me is we've taken a modern amount of technology but made it so mobile that we're serving in tents that are not all that disparate from the same kind of tent my father was cared for as a Korean artillery officer. Some of the basic things are very, very basic and very simple. People bleed to death, and our job is to stop them from doing that.
And it's different today, too, because the type of war that we're fighting, there's not usually long, sustained battles on a battlefield. And our soldiers individually are trained for self-aid, buddy aid, and so they can start treatment immediately. That's why you see a survivability rate today that's almost 90%, which is unheard of in previous wars. So the techniques are better, the definitive care is better, and you talk about the availability of care, we're there. And that's something that soldiers need to know for their morale, that I've got help right behind me, and they do know that's there. But the aid begins almost immediately compared to what it was years ago.
90% are surviving, but there's been lots of stories that there's a lot of injuries, and people are surviving, but surviving with a lot more serious injuries. So there are some trade-offs here. Is that right?
Well,
Life is the trade-off.
Life is the trade-off.
And I tell you, that's that might be something that people would take away, but again, having had the privilege, I think, for your viewers, probably the most amazing place that I've been witness to as far as medical treatment facilities in the military is a place we call the CFI, the Center for the Intrepid. And there's 3 of these centers. One's in Walter Reed, one's in San Antonio, Texas, and one is out in San Diego. And these were our particularly seriously wounded warriors come back to rehabilitate. And I went there one day with those same set of assumptions, like a layperson, and walked away an entirely transformed person. Realized that what is different now about this conflict too is that our wounded soldiers are not necessarily discharged automatically because of their wounds. If they are capable of returning to the service, and if that is their desire, then every effort is made to keep them a part of our service, even if it's in an altered status or even if it's a non-deployable status, and that's huge. That feeling of belonging and part of the mission is huge to these soldiers. And you sit at the CFI, and probably the only person feeling sorry for themselves that day was me, because I didn't know how to handle my own emotions. But there wasn't a single one of those soldiers who was taking a moment to think about why they were there. They were in the business of getting back to work.
There's tremendous resiliency on the part of soldiers. It really is amazing and inspiring when you see it. And it is our obligation to stay with them. We owe them that as a country.
One of the things that Jay mentioned is that you're trying to bring back certain things and instill them back here. And that's why in part of your intro I mentioned that you're working with the Cincinnati Fire Department.
Yeah.
Are tourniquets back on?
Well, so that's another great privilege. I started my career, I was a volunteer fireman, and it's one of the things that helped draw me toward medicine. So I always hold that as leaving the fire service was maybe not one of the wisest career decisions I've ever made, and they're very near and dear to me. But we're actually in the process of working. As you know, there's a new chief in the department, and we're working with him and his new leadership. But also at a national basis, I happen to sit on one of the national committees that makes recommendations for requirements for ambulance services. And as of 2012, tourniquets will be a basic requirement on all ambulances across the United States.
Wow.
Yeah.
The worry with the tourniquet before was that you may lose a limb if you leave it on too long.
Right.
But the real notion now is if you're saving a life, you'll lose the limb if it stays on too long. But really, in theater especially, the care is pretty quick. And I think Jay can tell you too that in the city the care is pretty quick today too.
Oh, absolutely. And so the issue is, you know, 1 hour worth of tourniquet is not going to harm the limb, but it's going to stop an hour worth of bleeding, and that's what will kill the soldier, or in fact will kill our civilian trauma patient from a terrible motorcycle accident with a devastating leg injury.
Okay, stay put. We're going to come back, but right now, stay tuned. Doctors Johannigman and Wenstrup will return after a short break.
We're caring for America's best and brightest generation. It's hard to describe in words the privilege and the honor it is to look these kids in the eye, tell them that we're going to get them home, we're going to try to get them better, and get them back to their platoon mates, their brothers and sisters that they want to serve with. It's hard to describe, but it's a privilege second to none. I am sure that years from now when I retire, I will look back on these deployments as the pinnacle of my medical career, not just my military career, but my medical career.
Back. I'm joined this morning by Dr. Jay Johannigman, a surgeon at University Hospital, and Dr. Brad Wenstrup, a local orthopedic surgeon. Both also serve in the military and have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Welcome back. Brad, we just saw a little bit of a piece of a music video that you created, right?
Well, I had some help, but yes.
Well, yeah. But, but you had the idea.
Correct.
And what were you trying to do there? Not all the photos were from Iraq and Afghanistan. Some were historic photos. What were you doing?
We were trying to show the history of military medicine and the concept of trying to fix the soldiers. I had heard that song by Coldplay, and it really hit me that this would be a great song to use to pay tribute to those that are the caregivers, and to give a little bit of a presentation of war through the eyes of the caregivers and how tough it can be. Sometimes we deal with things called compassion fatigue that can get to you as well. Just trying to make the point that, one, that we're there for you, but the two, it can be tough sometimes.
You know, when we were in the break, the three of us got to talking, and you said, and I'm not quite even sure how to ask the question, but when you're in theater and your interaction with the men and women who are there, what's your takeaway?
Well, I think we'll both agree that these are some of the sharpest people that America has to offer. And when you sometimes feel down about the country, you think about those that you served with, and you know that we have a great future as long as they're a part of it. Oftentimes we see that the soldiers can be depicted or perceived as joining because it's the only thing that they had left to do. Well, I would tend to disagree. These are people that are very bright. They're not desperate. They're not derelict. They have promise. And they are very sophisticated with what they do. You think about their job each day. They work with sophisticated machinery, and they have to make decisions like that.
No, it's just incredible. In a selfish way, I mean, again, one of the great joys of deploying is being around these kids. I couldn't agree with Brad more. You know, whenever you worry about the economy and where we are as a nation, you think about these kids who've been there. They know what tough is, and they're going to come home and lead us in that next generation. As we lose our greatest generation from the Second World War, we're building a truly best generation, and they've got a GI Bill that they'll go to school on. And I don't think the country will realize just what a gift we have for until 10 or 15 years from now, when that generation's leading us. And as I get older, that'll be the people running the country. I feel pretty good about that.
That GI Bill after World War II was absolutely critical in jump-starting what we know as the modern American economy and society. I mean, it just transformed the sort of skills that we had in our citizens.
Yeah, you know, and we have to, as a country, we're probably going to have to leave the industrial part of our country behind as we outsource, and it'll be time to redefine ourselves, and that will be through education, and probably education of this next generation, a part of which are these young men and women that we're privileged to take care of.
What about those I mean, that video, and we're going to see a little bit more of it at the end of the show. What that says, the emotions there aren't so up. They're struggling. Right. When you're away, when you're in the middle of working in an operating room, how do you deal with that?
Well, you count your blessings and you look at your victories. You know, we can all lament on the soldiers that we couldn't save, but we sure remember the ones that we did save as well, and that keeps you going. And when you hear the gratitude of the soldiers that you take care of, the troops you take care of, that keeps you going. When you have a tough day, a day that didn't go so well, you gather together and you're there for each other, and you look at each other and you go, we got to drive on, and we have to drive on for those that are still here. And that's how you deal with it. You deal with it as a group.
Jay, what do other doctors, surgeons that you interact with here in Cincinnati, are they curious about what you do and why you keep going back? 5 deployments. Why do they talk to you about that? Are they intrigued by that?
Well, you know, I think first and foremost you have to understand what a truly supportive and loving family I have, and my only regret is that I've watched my kids somewhat from a distance as they've grown up, because my wife has been there always and supportive. But I guess there's professional curiosity in part. I think nationally, I do see a difference in this conflict, because the medics, we're trying to get that word out to our peers on a real-time basis. If you look back, the Vietnam lessons actually didn't start appearing in our medical literature for 5 to 10 years after the conflict was over. We're trying to get those out and make national presentations to our peers for 2 reasons. One of which is we want to portray what we're doing, but we want to receive very important feedback. We want our peers, our civilian experts, to look at what we're doing and to judge us, say, well, that is right, or maybe that's wrong. Maybe you're off target here. In fact, about 5 years ago, we started what we think is a very important program where the military's largest hospital in Europe, in Germany, called Landstuhl Regional Medical Center, actually invites very senior civilian experts in surgery and neurosurgery and neurology to come and spend 2 weeks as we care for our soldiers, so we can work with them side by side. We do that in part, again, so that they can see what we're doing, but we rely importantly on that feedback. Are we doing the right thing? Is this correct? Can we do it better? And it's been a really dynamic and very powerful and productive give and take. So that's, I think, one of the other lessons, is getting that information. And credit to our military line. In the past, you know, the line officers were sometimes a bit skeptical about being open with medical information, but to the credit of our leadership, they really see that that is a benefit and not a threat.
when you leave that environment, if you come home and you haven't improved your skills in many ways, you really missed out, because the opportunity is there. And that's the type of stuff that you do want to share with those at home, the other doctors at home.
You're both in uniform, which means, I guess, you're both available and possible that you go back again?
Yes.
Certainly.
Certainly. Okay, it's just sort of that. How does, you're at a hospital, you're in a group. How does a group handle that when
Well,
somebody just is pulled out? Because you were gone for 15 months?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Well, Jay referred to family support. That's one thing that helps you get through it. But my group was fantastic when it was time to go. Everyone said, we're with you. We'll start seeing your patients. We'll help out in any way we can. We'll increase our load. And they did. They did a phenomenal job of keeping things going. They let patients know how I was doing. We communicated by mail sometimes with the patients, and kept the stream alive during that time. But really the patriotic support that came from my group of physicians that I work with was fantastic. They did, Wellington Orthopedics, they just did a great job of covering down and welcoming me home.
Same thing at the University Hospital. Yeah, you know, it's easy to, or I'd be really remiss if I didn't echo Brad's sentiments, which is a lot of partners took a lot of extra call, and not necessarily heralded for that, but it wouldn't happen without them.
We're almost out of time, and here we are on Memorial Day weekend. Final thought about either what we've been, military medicine, or anything else about Memorial Day, is what you'll be thinking about?
Well, for me, the national anthem has forever been changed. When I hear rockets' red glare, bombs bursting in air, I think about those we couldn't save. But when I think about land of the free and the home of the brave, I think about all those that saved us. And I'm always amazed when I think of the statistic, 1% of Americans have ever worn the uniform. And they have accomplished more than any politician or any other group probably in this world as far as providing freedom.
Okay.
Yeah, like Brad, some of those sounds, and for me, I think it'll be a moment of reflection, or listening to taps and thinking back to those things too, and really reflecting on it. What a privilege it's been to serve in the military and understand the people that work with us.
Well, thank you, both of you, for being here this morning, but more importantly, thank you for all that you've done for the nation and for our community coming back, and the roles that you play right now at this moment in our community. Thank you.
It is an honor.
If you would like to find out more about the men and women from the University of Cincinnati who form the 25th General Hospital, the exhibit is open through June 30th in the Winkler Center that is located on the first floor of the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. If you've never been to the new med school building, this is a great excuse. There's parking right across the street, and it's fun. You can check out the Winkler Center online, and you'll see the website there. We close this morning with the remaining portion of Brad Wenstrup's tribute to the medical professionals, past and present, who have cared for American men and women in the military. Have a good week.